Sorry, now I have to go. I presume everyone gets that same message. Is that the deal?
You have to approve it.
Okay. All right. This is the December 2nd monthly meeting of the Economic Development Commission. I'm going to share my screen briefly to share the agenda, but most of the time we won't need the PowerPoint, I hope. Just to quickly go over the agenda. Oops, there we go. If there are any additions or deletions, we take citizen comments at the beginning. There's maybe a couple new people here, maybe not. If you have comments about the topics that are on the agenda, it would be great if you would hold off until then. And as time permits, which it usually does, we let citizen comments run throughout the course of the meeting. We'll have a brief financial update. We have some pretty good news about, we just got our new quarterly revenue. I'll show you what situation we're in. The main discussion we want to have is under 6A, EDC objectives and strategies. This is a continuation of our discussion from last time. If you remember the 18 points of 18 objectives or potential objectives that the EDC has set at one point or another since 2015. We're going to start that discussion. We won't finish it tonight. It's going to be messy and complicated, and that's okay. We're just going to start it, and at some point arbitrarily, I'll cut it off because I think we'll want to digest it and come back to it again next month. And I think this will be on the agenda for a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, until we can sort of settle on something. I think that's a good way to handle it. We'll talk briefly, give a quick update on the 2022 grant process. It's automated, and you'll see some nice things. Todd and Deborah Green have, oh, Deborah's here too. Okay, good. So now we have 6. So Todd and Deborah have done a great job in pushing this to a new level. There's a few old business items. I'm not sure which ones we need to talk about at any length. And if there are any updates from any of the working groups, we'll hear those as well. So that's the agenda. Okay, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? No. Okay, hearing none. Any citizen comments on topics that aren't on the agenda or here? Now, when I look like this, by the way, if you see me, that means I'm looking at all of you, because that's where the screen is, for what it's worth. Okay, approval of the minutes from November 4th. Is there any discussion, or if not, could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Okay, I think, well, I heard Todd. Whoever spoke up before Todd, could you second it?
I second it, Larry.
All right, second. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Financial update. So first of all, let me just explain, just as a reminder, we get our revenue 6 weeks after the end of a quarter. So our revenue in Q1, we get in Q1, January, February, March, we get in the middle of February. That's 6 weeks after the end of the period which the revenue was for, which was October, November, December. So Q1 is February, Q2 is May, Q3 is August, Q4 is November. And so what we call Q4 is actually what took place in Q3. And so what I'm going to show you is, so we now have all 4 quarters because November has passed, but we haven't actually gotten revenue from October, November, December. It's last October, November, December, and this year's Q1, Q2, and Q3. And on the left-hand side, you can see on a calendar basis that our revenue has jumped back close to exactly what it was actually in 2018, almost what it was in 2019. And I'll show it to you a bit on a quarterly basis. In the first quarter this year, you can see my cursor, I hope. Our revenue in Q1 of 2021 compared to 2019, which was the last ordinary year, we were down 44% in Q1. So that would have been the activity last Q4, October, November, December. So our Q1 this year was down 44%. Then it improved to down 30%. Then the last quarter, which was our second quarter, we call it Q3. This is April, May, and June in Woodstock of this year, was up 4% versus 2019, the last ordinary year. And now this quarter, which is July, August, September, which we just got in November, is now up 25% over 2019. And but just judging, we have, Kareem is here, Patrick, I don't know if you can nod, but it seems like everyone is very busy. Joe, Jeffrey, it seems like everyone is very busy. So I would expect that our February revenue, which will reflect October, November, December, will also be well ahead of that same period in 2019. What that means is, first of all, sort of the economy has come back. Let's keep our fingers crossed that it will stay that way. But what it also means is that as we go into the 2022 grant process, I think it's reasonable for us to assume that our revenues for 2022 will be about 300,000, which is what they were in 2019. Maybe that's a little pessimistic, but things can always go wrong. I think when we are gathering at our annual meeting on March 12th, we're going to need to decide, how much to grant. And I think this is not a rule, it's just an opinion of mine, that a good prudent approach would be to try to grant in March what we expect to receive throughout the 12 months. So that would mean that we would try to grant about $300,000. Now, the last thing I'll show you is the unencumbered balance. As of December 31st, we think we'll have about $370,000 sort of reserved in the bank.
As of when, John?
As of the end of this month.
Okay.
It's a forecast for the end of this month. So if that's the case, and if in 2022, in our annual meeting, we decide to make $300,000 worth of grants, and we in fact earn in 2022 $300,000 back to the 2019 level, then we will end 2022 with $369,000 in the bank in reserve. So what we could do, if we were profligate spenders, we could grant $669,000, and then we would have nothing in the bank, but we wouldn't be broke. I mean, we would then get revenue the next year. So we've always operated with some level of reserve, waiting at some point for some major proposals that, or to greater use of the funds. And you can see, by the way, one second, Kareem, just the last point is you can see that in 2020, we spent way more than we took in, not surprisingly, given COVID. So there are years where we use up that reserve for things that we think are important. Kareem has a question. Can you just speak up really loudly?
Yeah, thanks. I actually had a question regarding the reserves. I was wondering if the EDC has a policy around maintaining a certain level of a reserve, and whether there should be a policy, because I personally feel that having $300,000 sitting in the bank when there's so many needs in the town is a little shocking to me.
Yeah.
So
we do not have a policy. I would say, as a practical matter, well, my answer to that was, well, we certainly don't have a policy. As far as I know, there hasn't been one. I'm proposing, so no, we do not. I would say that my own opinion is that we should, the money needs to be used for economic development. And I think we should grant money to things that we think are good investments, and not grant money to things we think are bad investments. So if we got $669,000 of fantastic grant proposals this year, I wouldn't personally, I mean, there's 9 of us, I personally wouldn't be opposed to granting $669,000. But if we got $300,000 of really good proposals and $300,000 of not so good proposals, I guess I personally would be in favor of just granting the 300 and saving the rest. So I don't know, let me hold on a second. Let me just ask, is there anyone else who has any other EDC folks first who have point of view about this? We don't want to need to spend a lot of time on this, but it's a fair question. Just take a couple minutes. Anyone want to comment? Joe?
I don't think any of us have a crystal ball. I've always felt that having something in the bank is always a good idea. Not knowing what card is going to turn next. So maybe not to the extent of $369,000, but
It's insane.
spending, I don't know, what is our record for spending in 1 year? And will 300 match that, exceed that, be below that? Or, I mean, it sounds like spending $369,000 in 1 year is a healthy sum, unless, of course, as you mentioned, something major comes along that would really benefit the town significantly, and we would need more money. But I personally feel comfortable with keeping a fair amount of money in the bank. That's my opinion.
Deborah?
I agree with you. I mean, I think it would be more shocking if there were, $400,000 worth of really excellent proposals that the committee just passed on and didn't do anything about. But I think we all have to just remind, out of an odd period of time, the amount of money coming in and the amount that was being, asked, everything was kind of on hold. I'm guessing in future years, we're not going to have this kind of reserve. And especially if we have more organization to how it's granted. So I like the idea actually of knowing that we have a reserve. So of not going beyond a certain part of our budget and making sure that there always is a $20,000 or $30,000 gap in our bank in case something catastrophic happens and that we can help. I like that idea, but I'm with you on if there's nothing that warrants it, we shouldn't just be committed to getting it out because we have it.
All right, Todd, and then Kareem, if you want to just close up the discussion. Todd, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I've said it before, it's the people's money. It's not our place to keep it, but I agree with everything that you've all said. We shouldn't give money to bad ideas. And what's a bad idea? It's an idea that we don't all come to an agreement on with enough votes to satisfy for a yay. So whatever that means, that's a bad idea. If it's a good idea, meaning the opposite, and we do enough votes in the commission, then that money should be spent. But I do think we should always, and perhaps we need to think about an actual number for this instead of being so laissez-faire. I think we need to have a good idea reserve budget, which I know Jeffrey Unicorn always brings up, what we've talked about in the past. Hey, what if someone comes in April? And we've said we all agree with that. So perhaps we should think about that in a more defined way on what should be in the bank. But I would want to say that the word reserve, we don't have bills to pay. It's the people's money meant to be spent on a year-over-year basis as we see fit, as it fits our mission, which I know we're identifying. But it's not like we have a mortgage, and if we lose our job, we have to have the mortgage. But I understand that somebody might feel different. This is how I feel. But again, I would stress strongly that we consider setting that limit for the good idea that will come after the grants are closed, should all the money be spent. That's the delta of that.
Yeah. All right, Kareem, just, sorry, Mary and then Kareem. Kareem, you'll be the last comment. Mary, go ahead. Just speak up.
The way you sprung into action when everything shut down in March 2020, I don't know what total you loaned out that year or granted out that year.
Yeah.
But without that reserve,
Right, we wouldn't have been
you
able
would not have been able to do that. So when you're deciding whether you should have a reserve or not, keep that in mind, because that was certainly a great avenue of support for people.
Right.
So that being able to do that as you did, you sprung into action in a matter of 5 days.
Yeah.
So that's very important.
And Susie Stoltz made that same point on the chat. So
Oh,
Kareem, you get the last word on this.
Yeah, so there's a reason to my madness. The reason why I'm raising this is because I think it fits perfectly with the conversation that happens to be a continuation of what you had last time, which is the raison d'etre of the EDC. Okay. So I personally believe that we are in a crisis right now in this town, and it's a financial crisis.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why I'm going to ask people to bear with me and pivot intellectually later when I'm going to propose some ideas on potentially how the mandate of the EDC could not be changed, but could be made more flexible within what was voted actually for it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will just note, just mathematically, I think if you look at this, that basically since 2018, if you average all of this out, I think basically we are spending on average what we are taking in. So maybe that was sort of by chance, but I don't think it was quite by chance. I think we sort of said, we kind of came to, okay, 300,000, 350,000 is kind of a level. And we've kind of been oscillating a bit around that without trying to have this line keep going up and just accumulating money, but also not driving it down to zero. I'm not saying that's what our policy should be, but I think that's sort of the situation loosely that we've been following. So, okay. EDC objectives and strategies. So it's 6:15. And what I'd like to do is to have a discussion about this. I'd like to start with the EDC members, open it up to other people, and then come back to the EDC members. And I'd like to take 30 minutes. And let me sort of lay out what I think the objective ought to be. Not the objective of today, but the objective over the next 3 or 4 months. I think working backwards 4 months from now, after our annual meeting, and not really influencing too much our annual meeting, because we agreed last time we would use the existing criteria and the broad criteria that we had last year. I'd like to be able to go to the select board in April and say, for the last 4 months in public meetings, we've been talking about our overall objectives, our raison d'etre, if you will. We've looked at what the motion was to establish the EDC, which is very broad and vague, economic and community development, 4 words, basically. And we've debated all the different aspects of it. And I'd like to be able to say to the select board, we've had one public workshop, let's say in March or April, maybe, where we've presented our ideas to the public after having worked them through, and we've gotten this feedback and refined it. And this is what we think the objectives and priorities of the EDC should be, at least for the next 3 to 5 years. And have the select board affirm that, or not, but hopefully to affirm that. That's where I'd like to get to. And to do that, I think at each of our meetings, we should have a discussion of this. Hopefully at each meeting, we'll make some progress. But at the first meeting, which is tonight, we should not expect great clarity. If we get it, fantastic, but we shouldn't expect it. In fact, we might end up more confused at the end of this 30 or 40 minutes than we had at the beginning. But what I'm hoping is that at each meeting, we'll kind of summarize where we were at the last time, and I will gently push us to kind of narrow and focus and synthesize so that we get to something in 3 or 4 months that we're pretty comfortable with, that we can take to the public, get their feedback and take to the select board, have the select board approve it. And that doesn't mean that won't ever change, but it does mean that we will, we will then run our grant process that way. Our website will reflect it, the kind of decisions that we would make, whether, that are affecting if the town is in financial crisis. All of that will then be driven by, for the EDC, will be driven by our objectives. So is everyone okay with that purpose and that time frame over the next 3 or 4 months? It's not taking us a year, but it's not taking us 1 meeting either. Everyone okay with that? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the list of 18 just as a reminder. Now, and I want to tell you what the list of 18 is. And and then I'm just going to go around on the EDC, go around on non-EDC and come back to the EDC. And you can refer to the list or you can not refer to the list. It's completely up to you. We're just talking about what should the raison d'etre of the EDC be? What should our priorities be? What should our objectives be? A couple of quick thoughts. First of all, on the list of 18, I apologize for not highlighting these, but 2 or 3 of them were recent, maybe just 1 or 2 of them were recent ideas that were introduced by Todd and Deborah's drafts of their documents The other 15 or 16 were the result of more public, longer discussions. I don't think for the purposes of this discussion, it makes much of a difference to differentiate between those, but just to be factually correct, not every one of the 18 has been public and debated for a long time. Some has sort of infiltrated into the process because I just wanted to throw everything into one pot. And to be honest, I don't remember which 1 or 2 or 3 things. Deborah, maybe you or Todd will recognize those, but I don't even think it makes much of a difference. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is I would just encourage people to think about the difference between, I'm going to use the word objectives and strategies. Think by objectives, I mean something that an outcome. The population goes up, income goes up, people are happier, more retention rates are higher. We have more people in the schools. The traffic is well controlled. Those are all sort of outcomes. Some of those are economic activities, some of them maybe less so. Strategies are what we would do to achieve those. Market Woodstock, create and fund new events, build housing. In other words, the EDC's objective isn't to build housing. It's a strategy to build housing so that we can achieve some objective, have more people working here, have more people living here, have businesses thrive, and so forth. So, and the reason why I'm saying that is, in the end, in that 4 or 5 months down the road, we're going to want to present objectives and strategies. And I would really like us to have a much smaller number of objectives. I think a good number would be 3 or 4 or 5. We could have over the next decade 10, 20, 30 strategies to achieve those 3 or 4 or 5 objectives. But what I think would be most useful for us and for the commissioners that follow us on the EDC is to get to a place by mid-year, whenever, April, May, whatever it is, where we've really got 3 or 4 or 5 objectives. And that everything we do, all the initiatives we have, all the working groups, all the grants that we give and so forth, can be linked to one of those 3 or 4 or 5 objectives. And those are the things, strategies or initiatives or tactics, call it what you want. Okay, with that, there's no boundaries to this discussion. Just say what you think is relevant, and I'm gonna just go on the screen and you can pass, I can come back to you, and then we'll open it up to the rest and come back. So I'm gonna start with Larry. Fortunately, you're first. Larry, Joe, Patrick, Todd, Deborah, me. And then we'll go to the non-EDC members. Did I miss someone?
Are you gonna put the 18 up?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Here are the 18. Let me just, let's just take a minute to read them. Oh boy, it's gonna be hard for you all here. All right, I'm just gonna read them out loud for the group that's here. With the first 5 are working groups. We have working groups around them. Market Woodstock to attract visitors and future residents. Increase workforce housing supply. Attract new businesses to Woodstock. Improve downtown physical amenities. Support and grow events to improve the experience of visitors and residents. Encourage and help existing and new businesses prosper. Create more job opportunities. Become more environmentally conscious. Make Woodstock a living and welcoming community for a diverse, multi-generational population. Promote a welcoming, sustainable Woodstock area. Improve and make the best use of the land, buildings, and other physical infrastructure. Increase the number of visitors who are most likely to develop connections to the area and contribute to the economy. You can see, by the way, that some of these overlap, right, or duplicative. Grow and diversify the resident population to enrich the community and the quality of life. Provide a financial benefit to the town of Woodstock. Improve the quality of life for all Woodstock residents and visitors. I think there's a duplication there. Contribute to Woodstock's economic vitality. Enhance Woodstock's beauty and support a livable wage employment. All right, so I'm going to go Larry, Joe, Patrick, Todd, Deborah, me, and then I'll open up to others. Larry?
It's Michael.
Oh, is Michael on? Sorry, I can't see. All right, we have to. Sorry, Michael. I'll do Michael, then me. Okay, we can't see everybody. I'm gonna I'm sorry, I'm gonna make the screen a little smaller so we can see it. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, yeah, I mean, I went through the 18 and I divides them into A, B, C, D and drew arrows to the ones that seem to relate to each other, and that broke it down. But for me, a lot of those are strategies as you define them. And some of them would be objectives. I guess I'm not going to be very helpful here. I struggle a little over the question of what is the economy of Woodstock? When we talk about economic development, what exactly are we talking about? And I don't have an answer for that. Obviously, part of it is retail and restaurants and hotels and whatever, but it seems to me that there's more to it. And the answer to that question then becomes part of the analysis. As I said, I'm not going to be very helpful. I'm interested in hearing what other people say.
Okay. By the way, I think it's fine to pose questions as well as have points of view. I think this is, again, it's very open-ended. Patrick? Oh, sorry, Joe is next. People have now moved, they've changed order.
Patrick, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
All right, Patrick and then Joe.
Okay. I see the EDC as helping to drive business. And I remember when, we voted on whether or not we take the 1% or not. And at that time, a lot of the discussion was help the businesses, and Woodstock, thrive financially, basically by bringing people in and growing the community as well as growing the businesses. So I kind of see this as simple things like bring more businesses to Woodstock. There are spaces for people to be here, in the main village as well as spaces in the town. So we bring more businesses to Woodstock, and it can be both for tourism, or not. Clearly we need more restaurants and more diversity in town. I think there's a certain part of this that is beautification, so long as it doesn't, and this is my opinion, as long as it doesn't mean we're doing infrastructure that the town should really be doing. But if there's things we can do to help make the town prettier, to make it better for people coming and make the people who live here feel better, I think that's a really good thing. And then how do we, the ability for people to live here is a struggle. And this may be a little more strategy based, but, find a way for people to be able to live here because the prices have gone through the roof and there's not a lot of opportunity for somebody who's not buying at a very high level. So if you want to rent an apartment in Woodstock, it's almost impossible. So something from that side of it. And then, promote whatever, all of the stuff that we do, to me, is wrapped in promoting the town to other people to come. And help us to continue to build the EDC that then helps build the town and the businesses. So that's kind of how I see things.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
This list is rather large. I think I alluded to that at the last meeting. I think I used the phrase, it's rather a wide brush. I would agree with John that, honing it down to 3 or 4 or 5 objectives, strategies can follow that. I think the objectives, in my opinion, haven't changed much over the years. I mean, what we've always tried to do is promote and encourage more business downtown and support it. Try to establish an environment where people like to live here and want to raise a family here. And how do we go about it? And encourage visitors, of course. So this list is just a little bit mind-boggling for me, maybe because I don't have that big a mind. I don't know, but it just, you know, I would probably, if I were to hone it down myself, I would probably bring it down to, okay, promote business, establish diversity or encourage diversity. And for me, I've always had the question in my mind, what brings or encourages entrepreneurship in any community? Is it a demand by the community, or do businesses established and the community recognizes the business and want to live here? Or is it a part of both? And I've always struggled with that question. I think I'm rambling a little bit. It's just because this is so big, it's really hard to kind of nail it down.
Yeah.
So I'm going to listen to a couple more people. Maybe we can jump in later afterwards.
Okay, I'm switching the order because when I moved the screen, people moved around in a different order somehow. So Deborah, and then Michael, and then Todd, and then me. Deborah.
I think it was really, really helpful for you to identify this in a way as strategies, because it would be really hard in a way to take any one of these things off the list. And if there was a good proposal that fit under create jobs or become more, you know, environmentally conscious, and we're like, no, we threw that off the list, we're not going to give money to that. I mean, any of these things would create economic and community development. They are all strategies. And so I think maybe the larger question is like the kind of bucket approach, which I think is what we're talking about, is create kind of buckets of like, what is our mission, you know? And that's the question that I heard come up when we were working on this over the last 2 months. That, you know, how we took this and created the buckets was, you know, it was enhance quality of life, enhance community growth, and enhance the health of the community at large. Health meaning, you know, both environmentally, socially, and economically, you know, so you can just fit within the buckets and say, okay, this is what we're up to, because somebody might come up with a proposal that would build economic and community development that aren't even on one of these 18, you know, and I would hate to say, well, it's not in one of these 18. I'd rather have buckets that we go, yeah, that fits within, and they've come up with something ingenious that we hadn't thought of, and therefore it fits. So I want to bring to attention the guidelines from 2020 that we were working off of and what was written. And I think the question that somebody had was like, where did they come from? Were these things that were voted on, or did somebody write this in, or where did these come from? But I think this is a good thing to kind of bring back and say, okay, do these 4 points answer the question? And then therefore the list can grow and grow and grow of strategies. And the list to me says what we're up to, which is to make this a livable and welcoming community for diverse multi-generational population, to promote and welcome sustainable Woodstock area, to improve and make the best use of land, buildings, and other infrastructures, and develop tools to promote sustainable economy. So I don't know where those 4 things came up, but that may be an easier conversation to have than to try to, you know, pully down 18 strategies, all of which, if somebody came up with a great idea in any one of those 18 areas, I would support if it was an awesome idea.
Okay, all right, thank you. Who am I going next? Michael, then Todd.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
I feel like there's a lot of redundancy on this list, and that probably easily half of this can just be erased. some of it is just kind of, I think, is understood. So if we're going to, improve the experience for visitors and locals, then that's adding, of course, we're going to make it multi-generational, right? We're going to make it a welcoming community. So, I mean, these are things that don't really have a lot of substance to them, I feel like. And I feel like, yeah, these are all great, but we really, as an EDC, we have to focus. And I'd like to really see our funding go towards things that are very tangible and palpable in town. And I think I feel like a broken record because I say this every time, but and I hear it from people that they're frustrated with where the money's going or what we're doing with it, right? And just to give an example, the recent marketing allocation of $100,000, I've heard endless complaints about that, and I didn't support it, but it's done, it's fine, but I hear these types of things, and I feel like I think it really boils down to what Patrick said. We have to promote and support our local businesses. I think that's our primary. We have to improve our physical amenities because they go hand in hand. Who wants to open a business in town that's not thriving or that's not friendly to existing businesses? At the same time, we have to improve the experience for visitors as well as locals. And I think those are our top three priorities. Everything else is kind of either understood that that's part of this. And again, and housing is its own separate thing, but I really don't think that we have enough money to make an impact on the housing problem in Woodstock. I feel like that is something that's left up to either developers or the town.
Okay, all right, thank you, Michael. Todd.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, John. I think, look, first of all, just to speak to Michael's point, you can ask 100 people in town the question of marketing or anything we ever do, and 50 will say one thing and 50 will say another, just like the country does politically and all these things. So I hear that. You can read the listserv and see 2 people complain. It doesn't mean 1,000 people complain, but maybe they do. I don't know, but I think we have to be careful about hearing complaints. Like, we could survey, I think, and we should represent people as a body in terms of trying to survey what the town wants and needs. And I think the most important thing is, which Deb and I brought this up, and I brought it up numerous times, because it really peeves me, so I can tell you my feeling, is that I don't know what the answer is when someone asks what exactly we're supposed to be doing. And I think that's led us down this path. What is our purpose? John, I appreciate you and everyone else in the commission taking this seriously and really allowing us to spend the time on it and setting a time frame where we hope we can do something in 4 or 5 months that's concrete. But there's a book, David Epstein wrote this book called Range. And this is going to go toward, it's a great book. Deb, I agree with you, but I disagree, because that's what's going to happen in this whole conversation with everyone, with everything, until we finally agree on something. It's going to be complex, but generalists, how the Range subtitle, I'm getting it wrong. It's something about generalists, how they thrive in a specialized society. Like in the old days, Tiger Woods played golf all day. He did this, he practiced, the greatest golfer, all these things. You can only play golf though. Where Roger Federer in the book talks about, he played all kinds of things and then he settled on tennis. He was great, but he's also great at lots of stuff. So I think the EDC, I'd love to be great at lots of stuff. So when we get to the list, I would say if we did an exercise, bad idea, but if we did an exercise and everyone in the commission and maybe even folks in the community gave one thing that we should be doing, one headliner, and we sort of maybe debate around that a bit, perhaps then we can expand from there. But I agree with Michael, Deborah, I agree with all you in the terms of no bad idea should ever be rejected because it's not stapled on a letterhead in terms of what our mission is, and unless it was so narrow that it had to be. So this rant is about this. The people give us the money. We got to spend the money. Not everyone's ever going to be happy how we spend it, but we as a group and as a community should know, which is what this exercise is about, primarily what that should be and where it should go. Now, one last thing is, I have as an entrepreneur, I have a very strong and growing opinion of how, Patrick is an example, you've been here for a while, Michael's been here for a while with your business. Joe, your interest in the community. As a newer person in the community, I find it incredibly difficult, almost impossible, to open a new business. I find the climate incredibly unfriendly with regulation. I find the town incredibly unhelpful. You see this with Peacefield Farm. We're getting it with the general store. People want it, but that doesn't help the fact that it's $1 million to get 85 permits and deal with 6 state agencies. That doesn't help someone bring a business to Woodstock. So just on my experience as a new business in a new location that's been shut down versus taking over an existing one, which is the same experience that we have in Pomfret with the Peacefield, where it's a new business location. I would love if there was a staff member of the EDC that can help people who want to bring new business to the community navigate all the politics, all the rules, all the regulations, because it shouldn't be $1 million to open a general store. That's the first thing you see when you enter to Woodstock, but that's what it's going to cost me. So we should think about that when we decide what we're here to do, because I think help is sometimes more valuable in a different sense than just financial help. I think that the gift of the people in the community here and their experience and their knowledge on both a state and local level could be worth more than the $1 million to me. So something to think about when we go through this exercise.
All right, thank you, Todd. Larry, could you do me a favor? I think you might be causing a little bit of an echo. Could you just mute yourself until you're talking? I noticed that your thing is popping up and we're hearing a little bit of it. All right, I try not to take too much chairman's prerogative, but I'm going to hold off on my comments. What I'm going to do is ask if there are any comments here from the non-EDC members and then non-EDC members on the screen, and I'll come back. So Kareem, sorry, can you come up? Because I think it just sit far away, but close to that.
Yep. Okay, so before I put my thoughts on paper, too much going on for me to keep it all in my head. I have a preamble before reading this. As you can see, John, this is very big font. The preamble first is I'd like to thank the members of the EDC because you're volunteers. I think we tend to forget the role that volunteers play, whether it's the select board, the village trustees, the committees, etc. So thank you for the time that you put in this, okay? My second preamble is going to maybe ask people not to be emotionally attached to the funding that is raised. I contribute to that funding, owning a B&B, and I'm not emotionally attached to it. And the EDC should be the same, because I think you can get a lot done without even the funding, frankly. Whether it's working on policies or processes, as Todd mentioned, et cetera, right? So let's keep that in mind. So with that being said, I'd like to contribute to the topic that is being discussed right now for 2 reasons. One, first off, I've witnessed that the financing of some projects by the EDC, and honestly, I was not quite clear how they had anything to do with what would be defined, in my opinion, as economic or community development, as they appear to be important, but to have more to do with what the town or village would do on a day-to-day basis as part of its business. The second reason why I'd like to contribute is because residents are facing staggering costs coming soon that will be plaguing all of us taxpayers, and all at once. The school, the EMS building, the wastewater plant, the town hall building, et cetera, which based on current estimates could run anywhere, and I apologize, it's a large range because the range is actually large, could range anywhere from $60 million to $100 million in total, okay? Therefore, I propose we both broaden the mandate of the EDC, but also ask the EDC to become more surgical in its approach. So I'm going to explain that. On average, the EDC's revenues hover around $270,000 a year. Okay, that's obviously we're excluding a pandemic year, right? Thanks to revenues generated by businesses such as mine via the 1% local option tax from meals and rooms and alcohol, and that is raised by hotel, inn, B&B restaurant owners and liquor sellers in Woodstock. First, let's see how we can broaden EDC's mandate. So in view of the massive infrastructure expenses, I think I heard the word infrastructure mentioned a few times during the comments of the EDC members. I would like to propose that $135,000, which happens to be 50% of the average that is raised every year by the EDC, be directed to cover infrastructure costs. This amount would annually fund the equivalent of a $2 million bond over 20 years or a portion of a larger bond. There cannot be any economic development without adequate infrastructure, and ours is crumbling. Investopedia defines infrastructure as the basic physical systems of a business, region, or nation, or town. These systems tend to be capital intensive and high cost investments and are vital to a country's, or in our case, to a town's economic development and prosperity. The second point is to be more surgical. And I think I'm echoing some of what I've heard. The remaining funds, about $135,000 a year, or the other 50%, should be dedicated to a maximum of 2 or 3 projects. These could be annual or multi-year projects. This is easier to project manage, will have a bigger impact, and avoids the EDC funds being spread over a multitude of lower impact projects. That's it. Thank you.
Very interesting. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Should I just go around, or do you want to raise your hands if you're okay?
Jonathan?
Yes, hold on one second. I'm calling on folks in the room. And then I'm
Okay, sorry.
going to come back to the screen. Any folks, do you want to comment, or? You can later if you want to. Okay, Roger and then Susie, and then I'll keep going if there are others, but you've got your hands raised. Go ahead, Roger.
Okay, so I have a few general comments and some more specific ones. Just looking at this list, first of all, just from a communication standpoint, I'm not sure who wrote these or what the generation of them is, but in terms of a strategic roadmap, obviously this needs to be rethought. Some of them aren't really even strategies, they're kind of aspirations, like become more environmentally conscious. I mean, that's mom and apple pie. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not goal driven or goal oriented in any particular way. I'm interested in what Kareem said. I don't want to, that's a very large conversation. And so the comments I'm going to make now are more assuming the continuation of the EDC in its kind of current role and makeup, although I think it's certainly worth discussing what Kareem is talking about. I think it's important to remember that whether deliberately or not, this is the Economic Development Commission, not the Retail Business Development Commission. And I think over the years I've seen grants being made, there has been kind of an a priori assumption that a lot of what gets talked about is about retail businesses and bricks and mortar businesses. And I think especially in the last several years, there are lots and lots and lots of businesses being started or continuing to go in this community that don't have a cash register and a counter involved. There are people in their houses who are working at home and who are doing business here and bringing economic development to this community. And I don't think that the EDC has quite been able to connect or develop an understanding of how they can help that community of people and how they can make Woodstock more attractive to that community of people and look at diversifying this economy a little bit. You know, there's more to this economy than tourism. Tourism is obviously very important, and retail is very important, and restaurants, as we have seen, are very important, and we would definitely like to have more of them. But I think the Economic Development Commission needs to stand back a little bit and look at what kinds of other kinds of business and other kind of economic activity and economic initiatives can be encouraged, developed, Just the basic fundamental infrastructure of the EDC itself. For example, the website is very, very, very much a tourism-focused website. It's got very little to offer to somebody who's really thinking about moving here and what are the schools like. And I'm not saying that's not a criticism. That's really been the charge. So I think as an economic development commission, and picking up a little bit of what Kareem was saying, focusing with as much of a laser focus as possible on what kinds of projects are encouraging the kind of development that is happening now in a new and obviously complicatedly diversifying and constantly moving economy. And so I think we just need to potentially, as we're thinking about goals, strategies, and tactics, that we remember that there's lots and lots of economic activity that I think at this point is not being
Consider.
well represented. And to some extent that's because maybe the people who could use help or who could understand, they may not have stepped forward, but I think it's time to look at that a lot more closely.
All right, thank you, Roger. Susie?
Yeah, so I mean, I totally agree with Roger. People who, like me, I brought my business here. I earn 100% of my money from out of state, but I spend it here. And we bring in a lot more economic development in terms of hiring painters, hiring people to work on our chimneys, and just all sorts of people in the community. A while ago, when Sebastian was still at the Optimist Center, we started putting together this resource guide and sort of teams to help new people who are launching brands, launching new computers, launching new businesses, sort of, provide them the skills that they need. Like I would talk to this one guy who was retired, and he had run a lot of businesses. He was an investor for a long time. And so he said he would step in and help people. I asked him, would you help if we were to recruit new people to launch their businesses here? Would you help them write a business plan? He said, yes, I would help them write a marketing communications plan. So I think that we have a lot of resources in this town. And I think it would be, if we could form sort of like, almost like a nurturing tank with, where we would provide skills to people to help them get going. I think we could attract people that way. Sorry, I'm not a very good public speaker.
That's okay. Your points, I think, are clear. All right, are there other people? If you'd just like to raise your hand, Ray. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Ray and then Jeff.
Yeah, I agree with Kareem, and I agree with Susie and Roger that, we keep talking about housing and retail businesses, but if all these projects come to fruition, nobody's going to be able to afford to live here because of the taxes. So I think we need to think about the long-term economic goal of the town being stable financially with some EDC funding, so that people can work from home and not have to worry about, I need to go get a second job because I'm paying for the town hall rejuvenation, septic system, new school. I just think some of those funds can be well used in that area.
Okay, all right, thanks, Ray. Jeff?
Yeah, thanks. So I've heard a lot of good things. Some of the things I've just heard are, I think, very difficult in terms of the mission that was voted on for the 1% tax for economic purposes. But I like the idea of business advisors for people who are working from home. Beyond that, starting up a business, whether it's working from home or a retail business, it doesn't matter. I like that idea, providing expertise, if possible, in that direction, as opposed to funding somebody's work itself. That's, I think, a difficult thing, and I'm not sure it falls under the mandate for the EDC. But certainly helping people start a business, whether it's inside their home or in a retail location, I think does fall under the mandate. But I would also like to say that I think that the list is too broad in many ways, those 18 things, great aspirations, but most of what we should be doing, I think the EDC should be doing, is within those marketing groups, not just marketing number one, within those 5 first groups. That covers a lot of what's below if you interpret them broadly. And I would like to see specific action on certain things that are difficult, such as when it comes to physical amenities, things that are not owned by the public, private. We have a landlord who owns the building that Dr. Coburn's tonic is in, still called Bentley's by most of us, which is in such terrible physical disrepair visually. And I think if we could find a way for the EDC to approach that owner and find a way to help create rehabilitation of that building and other buildings that fall in that same category, but that's the most glaring one to both residents and visitors. It would be a good thing for the EDC to specifically tackle. Other than that, I think that the working groups are very well defined in particular. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Laura Powell. Roger, hold on one second. Roger, you either put your hand down if it's already been up, or if you want to. I don't want to go twice until everyone has a chance to speak. So I don't know how to clear it, but okay, go ahead, Laura. Sorry.
Hi guys, my name's Laura. I just moved here recently and I've only been to a few of these meetings, so I'm sorry if my questions might be redundant or are historical knowledge, but I've heard a lot of comments talk about how this commission is basically a steward of the people's money. And I've been thinking about it a lot in terms of something that's been in a lot of communities I've lived in, which is participatory budgeting, which is like a wildly successful way to get community involved and vote on ways that communities can spend their money. And so I wonder, and again, as someone who's very new to this group, if actually the broad mandate is an issue, and that kind of like a part of what Kareem was saying, we would just work on making the grants and the impacts more measurable. So if we kept, if the EDC kept this broad reason of existence, to use John's words, to fund economic and community development, because I think, especially as somebody who's new to Woodstock, to me, I see so many things happening and so many different perspectives. And I think I kind of see these groups as very much like elected administrations, in that they have like a theme for a while, right? And they match what the people's needs are for the time that they're living in that town. So like for some years, it might be that we like really need to focus on amenities on some, and in another group of years, it might be that we need to like have more focus on sustainability and growing sustainable businesses and marketing sustainable practices. I look at this list besides the top 5, and I see all really good examples of the work that you guys do, and not necessarily objectives to the point, but more so just like examples. If someone were to say, what does the EDC do exactly? It says, well, we fund economic and community development. Here are some ways we've done that. And I know this isn't all that you guys have done. You're working on this list, but yeah, so those were just my thoughts. An exercise that I think that might be helpful is maybe everybody writing down what they think the EDC does. I know this is a part of a longer conversation, but yeah, that's all I had. Thanks for letting me share.
All right, thanks, Laura. Other comments? Do people know how to? You can either physically just wave your hand or push the wave your hand button if you are experts like Roger and Susie. Deborah? Oh, wait, sorry, Deborah. Hold on one second. Let me just let the non-EDC members come, and then I'm going to come back to EDC members. Any other community members that would like to add to this? This is a great, I've been trying to take notes, and it's a fantastic list of points, some of which are not surprising, contradictory, and some of which are in different dimensions, but I think it's really interesting so far. Anyone else before I go back to the EDC folks? Anyone here? No, okay, all right, we'll try to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or so. So if EDC members want to make any additional comments, feel free now to do it. Deborah, starting with Deborah.
Yeah, sure. I think this is a fabulous conversation, and it's really, it's going to be great to see this happen again and again, because the makeup of this conversation is going to change the direction of the conversation. So I think it needs to be had by different groups of people for you to take notes on how everybody is approaching it. Laura, I really appreciate what you're saying, and it's something that, you know, coming into the EDC and only being on the EDC for a couple of months, and the work I did with Todd, you know, and looking at, like, the thing that keeps coming up is, like, can we agree on who we are? Like, what is our mandate? And as we were writing, a number of times people said, but where did that language come up from? And then I'd say, well, that language actually came directly from the website, or that language actually came directly from the guidelines, or, you know, so I think that coming up with a clear statement that we're able to say to somebody, also to back our choices, to say, well, this is our mandate, this is our goals, gets us out of the conundrum of trying to call this list. But it also is a defining point for everybody to get behind, and, you know, then make choices from. I personally, but it's a longer and a heavier lift to do what you're talking about. And I've definitely been involved with communities who have done it that way, who take a vote, and that the community at large decides where they're going to spend their money for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, based on what's going on in the community. And that way you can really get a lot of shit done, excuse the language, but really go into a specific area of need and handle it, whether it is housing, whether it is supporting new businesses, or supporting homes, or in a situation where there's real need in the community because of a disaster. So I think that's definitely something that's a larger conversation of how we want to engage the community, and all really great points.
Okay, thank you. Todd, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I simply wanted to thank everybody, but in particular the public, for these thoughts. They're things we need to hear, and I think if more people would do what you folks are doing and come to the meetings and voice their opinion, would really help us represent the town in a better way. But Kareem, especially, want to thank you. You're always eloquent and put in a lot of time, but I just, we're here, we are volunteers, and we're here to help everybody, the 50% that like an idea and the 50% that don't. So I just really wish that everybody can go out and tell their friends, grandparents, get on the Zoom, come to the town hall, come be here for the next one, and please argue with us and tell us what you think we should be doing, so we can have some direction from you folks, because again, it is your money, and we need to spend it. And I personally pitch in the idea of bigger projects, but I also understand that sometimes smaller projects have a big impact. But anyway, thank you for these efforts.
Thank you, Todd. That was well said, in my opinion.
Thank you, Todd and Jeff. Devin, I think we didn't realize that Devin was here. Sorry, I can't see everybody.
All right.
Now I can see everybody in the
Yeah,
chat.
my video's off. It's fine. I'm in the car.
And then Patrick and Roger after that. Devin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that as I've listened to this, and I apologize, I came late. But I think one of the things that is I've struggled with since running the EDC is that because we have, I think we're the only pool of funds that are not allocated at the beginning or at the town meeting at the beginning of the year, and because of that, we end up just kind of being this fund that people come and say, we have this vaguely related idea, can you fund it? I'll think of the trash cans, for example, but also I'm sure there have been plenty of other examples in the past, and that's fine. But I think that we really need to focus on actually saying certain ideas just don't apply, and even if they're great, I'm not saying the trash cans were a good idea, but if anything, I think we said earlier, if there's a really great idea that forwards something that is somewhat connected to one of this long list of things, that we should work on it. I would actually say no, we shouldn't. I think that unless it is the best idea, best arguably three ideas, if we're going to narrow it that much, as Karam said, and directly relates to a pretty narrow focus of what we're doing and has a big impact on the community, we shouldn't be doing it just because it's a good idea that is we find compelling. That's what the private sector is for. So I actually think that we do need to really narrow this and not only say, okay, these are the kinds of projects we're considering, but within that already narrowed field, what is the highest priority categories of projects? Because I think that we're too broad right now, and even as we're narrowing, we're still opening ourselves up to a bunch of random requests. And I don't think that we should be doing that. I don't think it's the best use of our funds.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Devin. All right, Patrick and wait, sorry. I was going through EDC members. So Roger, hold on one second. I'll just see if there's any, and then I'll come back to you. Patrick.
I had a question for Kareem, and Kareem, you can send me something. You don't have to necessarily answer here, but I'm very curious at the types of projects you think that the EDC should fund. I'd like the idea of focusing and being more targeted, but I'm curious because I always struggle between what should the town take care of and what should the EDC take care of, because to me, economic development means economic development, not save the town. So I struggle with that myself. The other thing I struggle with is Vermont as a state is not conducive to business, just isn't. Act 250, there's a million things. I've tried to do things here. I've tried to look at things. I can appreciate what Todd going through with his, with the business he's trying to get going. And it's just, it's a tough situation. So I'm very curious. I think the idea of focusing is really great. And then the question becomes, and I'm not in the village, I'm in the town. And so I always struggle with everything seems to be about the village. And, there's lots of space around the town to create businesses and lots of great businesses around that are not in the village. So I always like to try to balance that between the two. But I'd be very curious. I'd like the idea of focusing on a couple of big ideas as opposed to a bunch of little ones. Big ideas that can make an impact, that will help everybody in the long run. I think is an interesting approach.
All right, I'm going to suggest that Kareem not respond, only because it's a very good question. And I think Kareem is raising very interesting points. But I don't want to get us bogged down in, now we start sort of saying, let's compare this.
That's why I said he can send me something later.
So, but I think hopefully you'll continue to contribute to this process and we'll answer the question, over time. All right, are there any other EDC members who want to say anything? Otherwise, I'll call on Roger and then I'm going to try to wrap up and move on to the next.
Roger.
Joe, go ahead. And then Roger, you'll get the last word here, but Joe first. Go ahead.
There's been an awful lot, I should choose the word awful. There's been a great deal of talk and a great deal of discussion and a lot of different ideas, including the 18 put out initially. And I would agree with Michael that, there's some redundancy, there's some confusion. Uh, there seems to be a discussion about what is the real identity of the EDC and what should be doing, not to be doing, a steward of the funds and all that. I'm wondering what has worked for me in the past. That I'm wondering when things get as broad as they seem to be right now, and somewhat large, and I don't know, I from what I hear, some other folks are having a little bit of a problem getting their arms around the whole concept of the EDC and what it should be doing and not doing. I'm wondering if it'd be helpful if we look back in history and try to determine why the public voted for the establishment of the Economic Development Commission in the first place, what was told to them and what was sold to them. I think that has somewhat gotten lost as things have progressed over the year and where we are right now. And I'm wondering if it might be helpful if we just get back to the basics and say, okay, this is what they wanted and this is why they voted for it. And I might add, it only passed by 7 votes when the initial proposal was made. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's getting pretty big, but I think a lot of people are just having trouble getting their arms around really what our identity is and what we should be doing. And maybe we should start from the beginning again and go from there. That's
Okay. All right, thank you. Roger, last point, and then I'm going to sum up and we'll move on to the next item. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to say, first of all, I think this has been a great discussion. I think you've raised some really interesting kind of broad strategic questions. Among them, how focused can you make this? Can you do 1 or 2 big things every year as opposed to helping out businesses, which has always been people coming and asking for a grant for the Optimist Center or for something else. Another interesting question I think that's been raised is how much room is there for the EDC to do things that are not specifically in budgetary terms, so that are not specifically about making grants? How much can the EDC become, can develop the resources or help develop the resources for people who are trying to do something in this town or in this village? And then, somebody pointed out, this is to some extent one of the only fungible pots of money available to do anything in this town. And it's a laughably small amount of money to do anything given what we're faced with. But because of that, there's a lot of focus on it, a lot of focus on what the EDC chooses to fund. And I think this conversation is going to go a long way towards focusing that so that people truly understand why and under what circumstances you devote the resources of the EDC, which are ultimately the resources of the people who paid the taxes. Thank you.
Okay. It's good that we stop here because I don't have any more paper. I'm at the bottom of the page. So here's my suggestion for how we continue this. Well, sorry, first, I just want to share my own opinion about this issue, about our objectives, not our strategies. I would like, I think Laura, I can't remember who it was, someone said that somewhere in here it would be great if we could kind of make things that we're doing a bit more measurable. And I think the EDC early on did some work in trying to set up metrics and so forth, and did that and didn't maybe continue it. And I didn't really emphasize it. So we haven't sort of seen it in a while. But to me, I would be comfortable if the EDC had 3, to get back to Deborah's buckets, although these are different buckets than but it's the concept of buckets, Deborah. I would like to see us have 3 objectives. Grow the number of residents grow the number or size of locally based businesses, and grow the number of visitors. And some of those are in conflict, right? I mean, as Susie, pointed out, that week of the first week in October, when growing the number of visitors, we succeeded at that, and probably we may have lost some residents or gotten them at least pretty frustrated about being here when we had so many visitors. So obviously these are in conflict, but it seems to me that more residents grows our economy in lots of different ways. And of course, different kinds of residents. We want to have diverse residents and multi-generational residents and residents with different skills and so forth. But to keep things simple, I can imagine an EDC where we have 3 objectives. We're trying to grow the number of residents. We're trying to grow the number or the size of businesses, not just retail businesses, but businesses, and grow the number of visitors in ways that make sense. So for example, let's not try to grow the number of businesses by getting an Alcoa smelting plant to set up at the East End Park. And let's not try to grow the number of visitors so that it makes life miserable for the people who live here and for the people who visit. But can we have those 3 broad, simple objectives? I think the EDC could, leaving aside Kareem's question about whether we should focus on some municipal things, what I'll call municipal things, which is a fair, I think, request, and not the first time it's been raised, that I could see an EDC that had those 3 objectives and then had a series of strategies that might change over time. I think, Laura, you talked about the different eras of some years we might do some things and some years we might do others. But basically, if we need more housing to grow, if one of the reasons we don't have more residents is we don't have enough housing, then let's have an initiative to do housing. Unless we think it's more important to basically support entrepreneurs who want to set up businesses here, and we'll hire people who will come here. And maybe that's a more effective use of our resources. And maybe that's not financial resources, maybe it's expertise and so forth. So anyway, just broadly speaking, I would love to end up with a handful of objectives. And I think residents, businesses, visitors, for me at least, that kind of works. Here's how I'm going to suggest we take this forward to next month, and unless anyone has a major objection. And I just have 2 observations which lead me to this process that I'm about to propose. The first is we obviously needed and need to have this discussion. I mean, none of us articulated it. I mean, a few people were reinforcing what other people said, but there were 18 points of view, right, across the number of comments that were made. There's obviously a lot to sift through, and we can't just do everything. We can't do what we can't, because some of the things we talked about conflict. And that's, I guess, my second point. We're going to have to make some choices. Here are just some of the choices, and who spoke last? Roger, I think you sort of alluded to some of this. Should we focus, or should we be open to lots of ideas? We really heard good arguments for both. Should we focus on the village, or the village plus the town? Should we be doing big things, or should we be doing big and small things? Should we be offering financial support, or should we be offering non-financial support? Should we broaden the use of our funds to tackle potentially a financial crisis that's taking place, as you suggested, or should we stick to what we have, what we've been doing in the past, which is to say, no, that's not what our purpose is. And there's probably more. And I think what we ought to do next is to focus on those choices. I'd like to go through this list and lay out what the choices are. And I just laid out 4 or 5 of those, and talk about each of those choices and see whether or not we can come to a consensus, not a unanimous point of view, but see whether or not we can come to a consensus, not about whether residents, businesses, and visitors are the right 3 objectives or whatever else the objectives are, but whether or not do we need to focus, or do we need to be quite open to great ideas that come up, even if they're not, on our list? Do we need to do a handful of big things? What was Kareem's? Just to use Kareem's example, half of our budget directed, well, really all of our available budget directed to 2 or 3 projects at most in a given year. Or do we keep doing what we've been doing? I mean, I leave aside how each of us feels about that. Should we be focused on the village, or should we be focused on the town? And I'll go through the questions, and I think there are more choices in here. And let's have a debate about those choices. because I think that that will significantly narrow our discussion. If we can come to some agreement on those choices, even if, again, if it's not unanimous, then the following month we can say, okay, we've made the choices to, I'm making this up, to do 3 projects a year, and that's it. What are those 3 projects? And let's argue about what those should be. And so, or we can go back and talk about objectives as well. So maybe we shouldn't just talk about choices. I'm sort of thinking out loud here, but I do think that we've laid out some choices here. And I think we should try to, and we've got 35 comments, but there's only 6 or 7 choices. So I like to try to go through and say, these are the choices that seem to come up, and put that list up next month at a minimum. And let's go through those choices and see where we fall out. And I'll try to send those out to you all in advance so that you can start to think about those. And if you have others, you could send those to me and so forth. Does that make sense? Or does anyone have a better idea?
No, that's a good structure, John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's a great idea to narrow it down.
Yeah.
As I've said a couple of times, just too broad a brush right now, and there's a certain amount of redundancy, and it's just, it's like it's difficult right now just to get your hands around or your arms around what direction we should be going in with this many things to think about, look at, and discuss.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna, again, hearing no objections, then I'll do that. We'll again put this item on the agenda. It was a little bit more than, only twice as long as what I thought. But I still think we'll definitely still be finished by 8. We have a couple of other things. All right, thank you all very much for participating in that. A couple of more items, and I think we can be close to being done. The next item, I won't share this now so we can keep seeing everybody, because we have to choose between the screen and the PowerPoint. The next item is a 2022 grant process. There's really no decisions for us to make. I do, however, want to thank Deborah and Todd and Larry for working on the grant process. And I just want to share on the screen, show all of you some of the new stuff that's been done that to basically make this online and make the process a lot more efficient, and also to give us all some to give us all the ability to kind of stay on top of it better. So I'm going to share my screen, but I'm not doing the right thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my browser now, and hopefully, hold on, I've got to change this. So we're going to lose most of you as we let the people see what this is. So this is the home page of the EDC website. I don't know if you all can see that here. It's pretty small. But you'll see in the second section, the pre-application forms for 2022 grants are now available. So if you know anybody who wants, oh, Larry, I'll call on you in 1 minute. If you know anybody, your hand is up, Larry, is that right? No? Okay. Where's that? Is that my hand? Okay, maybe that. Zoom is, it's a Zoom hand, yeah.
Thank you, John. That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I didn't even want that.
So the grant application, the pre-application is now online. I'm not going to go through it, but you can get to it on the homepage of the EDC website. It has, when you click on that link, it takes you to this basic page, which has some basic information about the dates. The pre-applications are due January 3rd. The final applications are due February 28th. The annual meeting is on March 12th, and it has a link to the pre-application. The pre-application is really simple. It has some instructions here, and then some basic information, and then some basic information about it's only 2 or 3 screens. It takes about, I mean, less than, well, it depends how long you're writing. You've got some boxes where people have written a fair bit, but it looks to me as if it takes 10 minutes or 15 minutes to fill in at most.
John, do we know how many, have we gotten applications already?
And now, yes, we do. And now here's the great part about what Todd and Deborah set up. We now can monitor, and the public can monitor, all the applications that come in as they come in. So if you go to the homepage of the EDC, in this little section here, which is the pre-application bullet point, there's a new sentence was added at 10 minutes to 6 tonight, which says pre-applications that have already been submitted can be viewed here. And this is just a really nice piece of work that Todd and his team did. So we have 6 submissions. And here's the kind of the summary of the first one: a leaf blower transition project, 1921 Central Street renovation, visit Woodstock smartphone app, children's garden and play space, e-bike rentals, and e-bike fleet. And in each case, you can read the full submission, and it has the answers to all of the questions on the pre-application. And by the way, this is a good way to see the pre-application. It's just basic information about contact information, a short summary of the request, a quick question about what the budget is, and you just have to check a box. There are just ranges of how much funding you're looking for and how much funding the project needs. What's the time frame? How does the project benefit economic and community development in Woodstock? And which EDC working groups does your project best support? And who are you collaborating, basically? So it's very, very simple. And now the public can now follow along on these grant requests on our website, and EDC members can also follow along on it. So this, we actually won't need to distribute this information. We'll ask you when the time comes to simply go to the website and review the pre-apps. So that's the process. I think we need to continue to market this both individually and on the listserv. If other people would like to, Todd, I'm just wondering. So anyway, so let me stop sharing. Todd and Deborah and Larry, if we can offline, if any of you would like to drive the marketing of this on the listserv and kind of just be a little bit of a pain in the neck to the community over the next 27 days, 30 days. I mean, balancing, frequency with being too annoying. I would be happy to give, since I'm the one that does that, I'd be happy to give that to someone else and have someone else be the annoying person instead of me. So if any of you would like to do that, or if you'd like to rotate, or the four of us could rotate, or if anyone else wants to volunteer, whether you're on the EDC or not, please let me know. And I will, and you can do that. Failing that, I will continue to post on the listserv.
And just want to point out quickly, John, that self-addressed stamps envelopes aside, there are printed copies for folks who do not have access to a computer for whatever reason, and they can pick those up at the desk when you walk into the town hall, and they can also be filled out and dropped back off right at the town hall, and they'll let us know, and we'll input that for folks who don't have the digital access.
Right. Yeah. So far, at least, though, we've only had, I don't think we've had any requests, which is good for the physical, right? We've just had.
I hope that there are 0 physical requests. Yeah.
Right. But please do encourage people, one of the ways Devin talked earlier about giving money really to the best possible projects. One of the ways of optimizing the impact of our funds is to have more requests than we have funds available. And then we're basically at least picking the best from among those that have been submitted. So I hope that we can achieve that. In 2019, we had $550,000 worth of requests, and we granted 360,000, which, by the way, was 60,000 more than our revenue that year. But I think it made it easier. I mean, it was unfortunate we had to turn down a number of grants, but it made it easier for us to pick what we thought were the best ones. So I hope that happens here. And I think we can all play a role, whether you're on the EDC or not, in encouraging people to submit grants. Okay. I don't see there. I have one personnel matter to raise, but I don't see any other items on the agenda that are absolutely crucial for tonight, other than to ask if any of the working groups have any updates. I don't see Jill. Is Jill Davies on here? Patrick, you can go ahead, and then I have a quick update on the housing working group. And if there are any others, feel free, you can go ahead. But Patrick, if you have any marketing updates? You're muted also.
Okay, couple things. On the EDC website is the chart that shows how the social media is going. Things just keep moving up. The Instagram has become sort of the place to go. Far outstrips Facebook. You have results on email campaigns, which we get amazing open rates and even better click-through rates than typical email campaigns that I've been involved in. So there's some really good information that you can get and see what's going on. It'll let you know which posts do the best and where we're getting a lot of our sources where people are coming from. Basically, Google's the first one, then the website, and it goes on from there. So there's some great information. I encourage everybody to go take a look at that. Okay, and in terms of the marketing stuff that Class 4 is doing, last time I told you we had the list all together, and we've already done 6 production shoot days. What they're doing in the way that we could produce the most amount of work, they're going to be doing all the shooting at once and then all the post-production at once after that. And then that's when we'll start to see video and images and so forth, and we'll create the basically digital infrastructure. So we'll have a good database of video as well as photography that can be used by the town and by people, businesses, and so forth. So they're working on that. And the next up thing that we're going to be doing is shooting for Wassail coming up. And they'll be starting on the infrastructure for the building of the database of names that we collect through the website. That's going to be starting after the new year. So things are moving forward. They're on target, and everything is going well.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick update on the housing working group. I believe that the housing working group is going to submit 2 pre-applications, one for a program to support the building of accessory dwelling units, and one for a program to create, possibly the second one, to create financial incentives for people to shift their housing from short-term rentals to long-term rentals. On the former, I don't know whether or not by the end of February, we will be in a position to know all of the details of the ADU program. It's a lot more complicated than we originally thought, but it's not yet deterring us from doing it. It's just that as a homeowner, building an ADU is very complicated. And we believe that we, the EDC, need to provide a fair bit of support to people who are interested. There is significant interest. We've done a survey and there's significant interest. But we've interviewed people now who've done it and people who haven't done it and are interested in doing it. And there's a lot that they need to know and that they don't know. This goes back a little bit to the earlier discussion about whether or not the most effective use of the EDC is to provide financial support or to provide expertise. And one of the things, and we're considering both, and we may in fact decide that we want to have financial incentives, but we may decide that we actually want to use the money instead to hire someone who can walk and handhold people through the process. I don't know that we can afford to do both. We'll have to see. It's possible we would propose both. But in any event, we will definitely have a proposal to do that. And hopefully the details will be ready in time for February 28th when the applications are due. If they're not, we may submit a proposal that says, here is what we know so far. Here's what we think the funding should be. We don't expect you to approve this, until we give you all the details, and we'll have those by June. We won't need a full year, and we think that the housing demand for housing is urgent. So we don't want to wait until the annual meeting in 2023. I'm now wearing my housing working group hat, not my EDC commission hat. So I don't know how we as commissioners will want to treat a request like that, but that's kind of where we are. On the other initiative, the reason why one reason why people want to lease their houses out for short-term rentals is that it's more economic than for long-term rentals. And we probably can measure that gap. I have the number in my head of $7,000 a year of the difference between a kind of a small or a medium-sized apartment to be rented short-term versus long-term. I don't know if that's right or not. If Sally, Sally's also on the housing working group. Is that number, do you remember that number as being real, or am I just mixing it up?
I'm not so sure we have a real number on that. There's a lot of different factors that are involved in that sort of type of conversion. So, but hopefully we'll get some better numbers by the time the grant proposal goes in. Okay,
well, I mean, let's just use that as an example. If that were the number, if we could determine that basically on average, a person would stands to lose $7,000 a year if they were to rent their apartment long-term. One thing that we would consider, and I think I mentioned to Mary, this might be controversial, I think it would be controversial, is to say, you know, for the first 10 people who apply, we will write you a check for $7,000 if you give us a lease, if you show us a lease that you've just leased out your Airbnb to someone full-time for 12 months. I mean, with the appropriate checks and making sure that this is actually real and so forth. And I think it's controversial because, you know, we're writing checks to private people. But if we took 7,000 times 10 and $70,000 to create 10 units of housing for long and increase the resident population by 10 people, would that be worth it? And we can debate that. But anyway, those are the ideas that we're considering. And I think we will probably have proposals for both of those for this year's process. Okay, are there any other any comments?
John, it's Tom Ayers at the Vermont Standard. I just had a quick question, if I may. This is the second month in a row where you kind of skipped over the agenda item on EDC input on the Woodstock Town Plan. And I'm just wondering what your thinking is about when that might arise, because as everyone well knows, that's drawn a lot of attention in the last month, particularly with regard to Peacefield Farm. And you had indicated at the end of last month's meeting that Peacefield might be a topic for tonight. So I'm wondering.
This is a problem for reporters who also take notes. This is, wish you hadn't done that, Tom, but given that you have.
Yeah, it's what we do.
Yeah, right.
Tom's the only one here who's not a volunteer.
Right.
Yeah, they pay me the big bucks at the Standard, let me tell you, folks.
Right. To be honest, Tom, I'm speaking for myself. I have too many balls in the air. I just haven't gotten to it. And by the way, I've read with great interest. I presume you are, or one of the writer of the articles and so forth, and talking about.
Oh yeah.
Issue and so forth. It's very informative. I have not done anything on. I just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. Is it, Sally? I think we still technically have a little bit of time to do it, to provide input.
We're trying to get the town plan rewritten by March, so we can't wait.
Yeah,
we can't wait that much longer. Right. So I believe I did send the draft, the current chapter on economic development around to the commission. And, you know, it would be great to get some input, but I think it does have to be done, you know, January, February at the latest.
Yeah, we obviously have to do that. Are there any EDC members who would be interested in kind of, you know, taking a couple of hours between now and the next meeting, take a couple of hours, go through the town plan, think a little bit about Peacefield Farm as one recent example, but not only that, and then come back at the next meeting and saying, here are, because I don't think that our contribution needs to be voluminous. I think we might have 3 or 4 bullet points that, Sally, we could pass on to the Planning Commission and ask you to incorporate in the language, or consider incorporating it into the language. Is there anyone who would be willing to sort of work on that? I think it's a short list of bullet points. So, you know, this is a holiday time.
I'm happy to do it, but I'm an interested party. So, you know, I don't know how fair it is for me to be the only one leading it, but I'd be happy to work with a group of folks. I think that the town plan, people need to understand it might as well be called the Constitution of Woodstock. It's a very important document, and all the words have very specific meaning. And when they're interpreted, it means a great deal to a lot of people, like you saw with Peacefield, like you'll see with the task bill, village designation, things like this. It's people need to understand this document. It's incredibly important, and definitely deserves some time from us to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
maybe what I'll do is that because there are, there's 25 people here at this meeting, and there's probably another 5 or 7 who sometimes come to meetings and so forth. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just try to schedule a brainstorming session. I'll invite the members of the EDC and the public. If we get 6 or 8 people there for 90 minutes, we'll get a list of bullet points and we can bring that to the EDC at the next meeting for us to digest, for us to consider. And Sally, and then it's early January, so whatever we can agree on at that meeting, we'll give you those as those bullet points for input.
So I would just add one other thing, and people may not have heard of this because it just happened last night, but Sally, I think, knows about it. There's going to be a public hearing on January 11th at 7 p.m. on the petition that has been submitted by more than 5% of the Woodstock voters to change the zoning regulations to allow on-farm restaurants throughout the town. And, by dint of the state statutes regarding citizen initiatives and petitions like this, from what Neil Leitner told me this morning, the Planning Commission has simply passed this right on to the public hearing process. So about a week after the EDC's next meeting in January, there will be this public hearing on this petition-driven amendment to the zoning regs. Just share that with you. Might be good timing.
I think that's useful. Yeah, my own personal sense is that what we ought to be focused on broad policy.
Yeah.
And that petition, which personally I supported, is a specific instance of something, and the Planning Commission is the right forum for that. So it's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sally?
I'm just going to comment on the fact that it's not really going to be a public hearing in the sense that it has to be a public hearing, but there's not going to be any opportunity for the Planning Commission to make any changes once it has been, because it is a petition, the language
Right.
as written. So this is not the normal process for the Planning Commission. There's no opportunity for the Planning Commission to get testimony or to discuss what the actual petition means.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you for clarifying that, Sally.
It's not really a public hearing in the sense is we can't make any changes to what was actually
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Are there any other updates from any of the working groups before I have one last item and then we can adjourn? I don't see any. That little hand it must be ours because it's still sitting. Now it's over Ray. But okay, sorry. I don't think you guys can see it.
I need to delete it from mine.
John, are you sure it's still really there? I know it's getting late at night. You sure you see it?
Could be. All right, the last item, just before we adjourn.
John, can I just say one thing? It's come up a couple times tonight, and I think it would be great if I get frustrated when I read the listserv and people are making comments and they don't come to the meetings. I don't know if there's some way that we can put some initiative out there, whether it's in the listserv or wherever it is. I'd love to see 50 people in these meetings. It'd be a nightmare, but at the same time, it would be really great because then people could see what's going on. And instead of making a comment, after we've made decisions based on, people's points of view and so forth, it's a little frustrating. And I give Sally a lot of credit, who's been doing this for how long, Sally? So, it really is frustrating when people are making comments like we're hurting them, but they were at none of the meetings. So I don't know if there's something we can do about that, whether we just put something on the listserv and invite people more, and I don't know what to do, but just I throw that out there to everybody to think about that, how can we make this better? Especially now that it's Zoom, you don't even have to get in your car.
I just for what it's worth, I went through that phase too, Patrick. And I've now passed through it. I don't know that it's possible to announce the meetings more.
I wasn't thinking about actually that. I was thinking more about actually doing, and maybe I'll do it myself. Just a post about, hey, instead of commenting in the listserv, comment at the meeting.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, there's no. There's no way to win. We've had in the past people who have complained that when we posted that, what we were saying was stop commenting in the listserv. And they said that someone came to me and said the EDC should stop publicly censoring members of the community. I'm not making this stuff up. You can't make it.
Somebody once said to me, haters will hate.
So, my view is what I have found is that when you say to somebody, if you feel that person face to face, if you feel that way, just come to the meeting, usually is an effective way of ending the conversation. So, but anyway, thank you for your thing. If there's a groundswell of desire to work on that, then we can put it on the agenda. But I think you'll pass through it, Patrick, and then you come to a more peaceful place where you just read the listserv for entertainment rather than
I'll stop denting the wall with my head.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to comment, and you sort of introduced the topic by saying to Sally, how long have you been doing this? So tonight today and tonight is Sally's last meeting as EDC administrator / coordinator. And I know I speak for everyone, Sally, and if anyone else is welcome to speak, but I think I wasn't here when you first came onto the EDC, but it's pretty clear, as I've understood what's happened, that before the position was created and then before you filled it as the sort of the first person to fill it, the EDC it's not the EDC's fault, was really unable to operate as a professional, semi-professional commission. And you really were the one that that created the processes and that drove the EDC to follow them for the most part. And that's not something that anyone can do. It required someone of your knowledge of the community and stature and level to make the commission operate in basically the way we operate now. And I know that there's, we just had a long discussion about how we can operate better and all of that stuff, but fundamentally, we are operating in a professional way, which is what we should be doing. And a lot of that, maybe most of it, is due to your initial work and your building work. And I also say your meeting by meeting diligence, where I'm proud to say that you have not corrected me. We're 1 minute from the end of the meeting and you have not yet corrected me, which is the first time in a long time. So, but I mean, that it's a testament to your work that I count that as an achievement. So I want to, on behalf of everyone, I want to thank you for this. The reason you're stepping aside is because which is great, is your architecture practice is taking off, and good luck to you. That's fantastic. I know you're not going to disappear, but it's going to be big shoes to fill, and we're starting to look for someone to do that, and hopefully we'll have someone soon. So, and we'll be posting the position. We do have one person who might be interested, and if any of you know anyone who you think, could do some of what Sally does, or even all of what Sally does, just let me know, and that would be great. Sally, do you want to say anything? You get the last words here before we adjourn.
Yeah, no, I don't really have much to say. I mean, it's been great. It's been a really good process. And I agree that I think the EDC has evolved. It's been, different members at different times and bringing everybody together with all these different ideas. And I certainly enjoyed doing what I have done. And, it's bittersweet, but I'm very busy doing other things. And I certainly will stay involved in the community, and I will be around, and I'm still here if you have questions, and, as a community resource, that's kind of where I am now. So thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Patrick raised his hand first. Todd, will you second it?
I second it, sir.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, so, I am gonna give Patrick a call. I've had, so many people come